They weren't born with more time, more strength, or more intelligence than the rest, but they were built different, not by nature, but by decision. The top 1% aren't driven by convenience or fleeting feelings. They are sculpted by discomfort, forged in pressure, and refined in isolation. While the world seeks comfort, they chase confrontation not with others, but with themselves. They wake up every day with a war in their chest and the discipline to silence the noise. Their mornings don't start with motivation, they start with movement. The average person waits to feel good before they act, but the 1%, they act until it feels right, and even then, they keep going. They don't wait for perfect conditions, they create them. They don't get ready, they stay ready. The foundation of the 1% is not talent, not luck, but an unbreakable mindset. They've buried doubt beneath repetition, they've drowned excuses in sweat, they've silenced fear with action. Where others seek balance, they build borders. Not everyone gets access to their energy, their time, their mind, because they know every second they waste trying to explain their ambition is a second lost in the pursuit of mastery. And mastery is all they chase. Not success, not fame, but mastery. Mastery of the grind, mastery of the mental game, mastery of themselves. They don't need applause to know they're working. The work is the applause. They don't need validation to move. Their vision is louder than anyone's opinion. While others chase what's visible, they build what's invisible. Mindset, consistency, control. That's why they don't break when life throws chaos at them. That's why they keep moving when the world stops. They've trained for pain. They've befriended discomfort. They've made sacrifice their shadow and routine their religion. Every rep they push, every morning they rise early, every night they grind when the world sleeps. It's not because they're addicted to success. It's because they've become allergic to mediocrity. The top 1% are allergic to average. They look at failure and see feedback. They look at hard days and see opportunities to toughen the armor. They don't fear obstacles, they operate inside them. You think they never feel like quitting? Of course they do. But they don't negotiate with weakness. Their emotions don't run their schedule. Their mission does. They've built a code, and they don't break it. They're not motivated every day, they're committed every day. And that's the difference. That's the foundation. That's the reason they never lose motivation, because they don't depend on it. They've evolved past it. While most people wait for the spark, the 1% become the fire. They've built lives that run on systems, not moods. On habits, not hype. On purpose, not pressure. You won't see them bragging online, they're too busy building offline. Their mornings are silent, their calendars are sacred, and their goals are non-negotiable. The foundation of the 1% isn't something they were handed, it's something they bled for. They chose the path with no applause, no shortcuts, no guarantees. And because they did, they earned the only thing that matters in the end: control. Control of their habits, control of their reactions, control of their future. While the 99% blame, scroll, whine, and wish, the 1% build, adapt, grind, and rise. And they'll keep rising because their foundation is built on something no failure can shake and no opinion can weaken: discipline, clarity, and unshakable self-respect. That's why they don't lose motivation, because what they've built inside is bulletproof. There comes a moment in every person's life where they must choose between how they feel and what they said they would do. And that's the line where the 1% separate themselves from the rest. Discipline over emotion isn't a quote on a gym wall. It's the heartbeat of every elite performer who refuses to be a slave to their mood. The 1% understand that feelings are fleeting, inconsistent, unreliable, but discipline is consistent, dependable, and repeatable. They don't trust emotion because they know emotion lies. It tells you to stay in bed when you swore you'd get up. It tells you to skip the grind because you're tired. It seduces you with comfort, whispers fear, drowns your fire in excuses. But the 1% have killed that voice inside, or worse, they've tamed it. They've caged it in the corner of their mind and trained it to stay silent when purpose is speaking. That's why they don't wait for motivation. They report for duty whether they feel like it or not. The alarm doesn't ask if they're inspired. The workout doesn't care about their mood. The mission doesn't pause because they're emotional. Their life is built on systems, habits that run even when everything else is falling apart. And that's why they win. While the 99% live on a roller coaster of highs and lows, starting strong, quitting fast, talking loud, delivering weak, the 1% grind on flat ground. Emotion doesn't get to steer the wheel, vision does. And that vision is so clear, so burning, so locked in, that no excuse is loud enough to override it. They show up when it's boring, they show up when they're broken, they show up when No one's watching, because their fuel isn't feeling, it's identity. They've become the kind of person who does what needs to be done, no matter what. Not sometimes. Not when convenient. Always. That's discipline. That's the real fuel. It's not glamorous. It's not sexy. It doesn't trend on TikTok, but it's the reason their lives are unrecognizable 5 years down the line. They aren't reactive, they're intentional. They don't seek dopamine hits, they delay gratification. While others want results now, they plant seeds and water them with sweat. They understand that the pain of discipline is always lighter than the pain of regret, and so they choose pain every day with open arms, because they know the feeling of accomplishment, of growth, of becoming something no one thought possible, is worth every lonely morning, every silent rep, every unnoticed win. Emotion may inspire you to start, but only discipline will make sure you finish. And the top 1% are finishers, closers, builders, not because they're stronger, but because they're committed deeper than their doubts. They don't entertain, maybe they don't debate their own standards. They live by principle, not by popularity. Their calendar isn't controlled by mood swings, it's protected by purpose. And when emotion does show up, anger, sadness, fatigue, they don't let it derail them, they convert it. They use it. The discipline becomes their firewall, their anchor, their internal GPS that keeps guiding them forward even when the fog rolls in. That's why they don't lose motivation, because they're not dependent on it. They've got something better. Standards, systems, routines, values. They've hardwired the grind into their identity. And once you do that, once you become someone who doesn't miss, who doesn't flinch, who doesn't fold under feelings, that's when you become unstoppable. Not because the fire outside got easier, but because the fire inside got permanent. That's the kind of discipline the 1% carry. That's the real fuel behind every giant you've ever admired. And that's the price of greatness, not hype, not hustle porn, not aesthetics, but showing up with zero emotion and 100% execution, day after day after day. The top 1% never chase perfection. They chase progress like their life depends on it, because deep down they know it does. While the masses wait for the perfect timing, the perfect plan, the perfect version of themselves, before they act. The elite understand that perfection is a myth, a trap, a lie dressed as ambition. The top 1% didn't rise to the top because they had perfect routines or flawless strategies. They rose because they moved forward relentlessly, even when the plan was messy and the road unclear. They are not obsessed with being the best, they are obsessed with becoming better, every single day. 1 inch, 1%, 1 rep. They live in the grind, not the goal. They don't need applause to move, they move because growth is oxygen. To them, every mistake is data, every failure is feedback, every fall is a step forward. That's why they don't get paralyzed by setbacks. They use them, they sharpen their edge with every loss. And while perfectionists wait for the perfect conditions to launch, the top 1% launch, fail, learn, adjust, and repeat. That's the rhythm, that's the obsession. They measure their life by progress, not perfection, by how far they've come, not how far they have to go. They're not comparing themselves to the highlight reels of others. They're competing with yesterday's version of themselves. That's what keeps the flame alive, not being perfect, but being better. That mindset doesn't just fuel their grind, it protects their motivation. Because when your focus is on growth, you never lose. Even the losses make you stronger. Even the pain becomes purpose. The world sees their success and thinks it's magic, but they don't see the thousands of micro-improvements stacked behind that one big win. They don't see the nights spent in silence, tweaking, refining, showing up tired, bleeding through doubt, pushing forward when no one was clapping. Progress is the only addiction the top 1% allow, and it's an addiction that multiplies, because every time they level up, they get hungrier, not satisfied. They don't relax at the top, they reinvent. They don't just want results, they want growth in every area. Mind, money, mission, mastery. They track it, measure it, celebrate it, not in public but in private. Because it's never been about recognition, it's always been about evolution, and that's the mindset that keeps their motivation unbreakable. They've divorced perfection and married momentum. They don't allow the fear of not enough to stop the power of just one more step. They know that every empire was built brick by brick, day by day, failure by failure. They're willing to be bad at something long enough to get great. They're willing to look stupid to gain wisdom. They're willing to be judged in silence so they can be respected in legacy. The 1% understand that greatness isn't an outcome. It's a direction, and as long as they're moving in that direction, no matter how slow, they are winning. That's what separates them. They're obsessed with progress. Not hype, not image, not approval, just raw, ugly, beautiful, painful, powerful progress, and that obsession becomes their armor. That focus becomes their freedom. That mentality becomes their motivation, the kind that doesn't burn out because it's not chasing a finish line, it's chasing constant elevation. That's why they never lose motivation, Bawaji, because they're never chasing perfection. That can't be reached. They're chasing growth that never ends. And in that pursuit, they become what the rest only dream of. Not perfect, but powerful beyond measure. The difference between the ones who rise and the ones who rust is simple. The top 1% don't live for now. They live for next. They've mastered the art of delayed gratification because they understand that anything worth having comes at the cost of patience, discipline, and sacrifice. While the 99% sell their futures for short-term comfort, the 1% invest discomfort to buy long-term greatness. They're not chasing likes, they're chasing legacy. They don't need dopamine. To move, they need vision. Every craving they deny, every shortcut they reject, every temporary pleasure they sacrifice becomes another brick in the empire they're building. They know this game is long, and that's why they last. That's why they don't lose motivation. Because their motivation isn't based on immediate results. It's built on inevitable outcomes. They're not fueled by the applause of now. They're driven by the echo of forever. They've trained themselves to say no when the world says yes. No to comfort. No to distraction. No to the fake urgency that screams for their attention. They understand that every yes to nonsense is a no to purpose. So they've mastered the pause. They've developed the power to sit in silence, to hold the line, to work while others play. They grind in the dark knowing the light will eventually find them, and when it does, they'll be ready. Not because they hoped, but because they built while others want it now. Validation, results, recognition. The 1% are playing decades. They think in years, not moments. They don't flinch at slow progress because they know fast success is usually fragile. They don't chase the feeling of winning, they chase the foundation of winning. They understand that every legendary life is the byproduct of small, consistent, thankless choices that compound in silence. That's why they wake up early, train when it hurts, read when they're tired, and build when no one's cheering, because they've seen the other side, the regret of giving in too early, the pain of living for the crowd, the emptiness of shortcuts, and they want no part of it. They're addicted to the grind not because they love the pain, but because they love what the pain builds. Delayed gratification isn't suffering to them, it's strategy. They know the man who sacrifices today for tomorrow will own every man who tries to eat the fruit before the roots are deep. They've got vision so sharp it slices through temptation. And while others waste time negotiating with their urges, the 1% execute, cold, calculated, clear. They don't chase rewards, they create results. And because they've detached from needing something right now, they move with more peace, more purpose, and more power. They're not desperate, they're dangerous, because nothing controls them. Not money, not fame, not validation. They've trained their emotions like a soldier sharpens his blade. Steady, lethal, silent. You'll see them pass on things you think are important. You'll wonder why they're missing parties, skipping trends, ignoring noise. But what you don't see is what they're building behind closed doors. An unshakable life. A mind that can't be bought. A foundation no storm can move. That's what delayed gratification buys you: the power to own your time, your focus, your destiny. And in a world drunk on instant everything, the man who moves slow, steady, and strategic is the most dangerous man alive. That's why the 1% are unbreakable. They've starved distractions, fed their discipline, and sacrificed average for excellence. And they keep doing it, year after year, quietly compounding results while the world scrolls, binges, and complains. The 1% don't play for applause, they play for legacy. And that legacy isn't built in a day, it's built daily. That's why they don't need external motivation, because they already know what they're building is worth the wait. And when you believe your future is worth more than your present comfort, you become unstoppable. That's how they move. That's how they win. That's why they never burn out. Because they never chase the high, they chase the harvest. That's delayed gratification. That's long game mentality. That's 1% thinking. There's a reason the top 1% don't quit, don't burn out, don't fade away. And it's not because they have better tools or easier paths. It's because they've found something deeper than pain, something louder than fear, something more permanent than motivation. They've found purpose. While the world gets crushed by temporary obstacles, the 1% rise through storms because they are anchored to something bigger than themselves. Their goals aren't built on vanity or trends, they're built on mission. That mission becomes the fire that burns through excuses. the compass that guides them through chaos. They don't need to feel like it, they just need to remember why they started. That why is so rooted, so powerful, so personal, that it turns every failure into fuel and every wound into wisdom. They don't run from pain, they convert it. Pain becomes their teacher, not their enemy. It doesn't stop them, it shapes them. While the average person crumbles under pressure, the 1% press forward, because they know the pain is part of the process. They've stopped negotiating with comfort a long time ago. They've accepted that the path to purpose will cost them friends, sleep, ego, even pieces of their old self, but they pay the price gladly. Because what they're chasing is priceless. They're not driven by proving others wrong. They're driven by proving their calling right. And that's why their motivation doesn't die, because it isn't built on emotion. It's built on identity. They've become the embodiment of their purpose. They don't just chase goals, they breathe them. You can feel it in the way they walk, work, speak. It's in their tone, their eyes, their silence. That inner fire is constant, not because they're superhuman, but because they've trained their soul to serve something higher than pleasure. That's what most people miss. They're chasing motivation like a drug, hit after hit, video after video, wondering why it never lasts. But the 1% don't chase motivation, they chase alignment. Their goals match their values, their work matches their vision, their daily actions match their destiny. And that kind of alignment creates energy that doesn't fade when it gets hard, it intensifies. They're not trying to escape the grind, they're married to it, because the grind is the gate to the life they were born for. Pain doesn't scare them because they've seen what quitting costs. They've tasted regret and it left a bitter mark they never want again. They've buried the old versions of themselves under discipline, bled through seasons of silence, sacrificed spotlight for substance, and still they rise. Every battle, every betrayal, every lonely season, it added weight to their purpose. That's what makes them unshakable. The pain didn't kill their fire, it clarified it. And once your fire is clarified by pain, no one can put it out. That's why they don't rely on motivation, they rely on meaning. When your life has meaning, every step matters, every sacrifice makes sense. Every moment is a brick in a legacy. The top 1% don't need cheering, they've got conviction. They don't need reminders, they've got resolve. They don't fear pressure, they respect it, because pressure reveals what purpose has prepared. That's the truth. The average crumble because they never found a reason big enough to endure the pain. But the elite, they rise through pain, because their purpose is too big to die in. Comfort. And when you move from I want to I must, you become untouchable. The 1% don't get lucky, they get locked in. Locked into a mission that doesn't waver when life gets heavy. They've cried in silence, trained in the dark, rebuilt themselves when no one believed, and now they walk with a fire no one gave them because it came from the depths, from the dirt, from the darkest places where excuses live, and they crushed those excuses under the weight of purpose. That's why they don't lose motivation, because their fuel isn't hype, it's honor. They're not trying to win for applause, they're trying to win because they know someone out there is depending on them. Their family, their legacy, the younger version of themselves that never had a voice, they're doing it for them. That level of purpose, it makes pain irrelevant. It makes obstacles invisible. It makes every I can't sound like a joke. That's the level you have to reach. Not surface level drive, but soul level conviction. Not temporary hype, but eternal fire. You don't get that by scrolling, you get that by suffering for something greater. You get that by walking through hell with your head up, eyes forward, and heart unshaken. That's the fire that never dies. That's why they're the 1%. That's why their motivation doesn't fade, because it's not motivation at all, it's purpose in motion.